Well, if you have to come to London to talk about the coronation and what all of us in India should be thinking about the coronation, who better to talk to than Amish? He's not just one of India's best authors, he's also the minister here at the High Commission for Culture and for Education. And you also know more about Indian history than virtually anybody else I know. So Amish, multiple hats. And which hat are you going to be? Author hat, diplomat hat, minister for culture hat?
I cannot ignore the diplomatic hat. I am in London, so I will be a little careful.
You have to be a little careful. You have to be diplomatic. At the end of the day, you are a diplomat. Now look at this. Look at these as symbols of,
Arch. That's actually Nike on top. So the goddess of victory, the ancient Greco-Roman goddess of victory. Yeah.
So when you're talking about victory, that's what tomorrow's all about, right? The coronation is all about pageantry, it's all about celebrating the monarchy, it's all about celebrating British pride. How should we as Indians be thinking about all this?
Look, if I have to think about it honestly, right? I can appreciate the way the British would look at it. I can understand that. But look, we are Indians, we can be pragmatic and we can hold multiple truths in our own mind. So, there's often this talk about a shared history. The shared history from the Indian perspective is not positive actually, to be honest. But we are pragmatic. So we are willing to look ahead, just put that on the side and look to the future. And again, we are Indians, we are capable of managing multiple truths. So we can see that from the British perspective, of course the royalty is extremely important. Of course their traditions are important. It may not necessarily be that important for us, but we will respect their truth.
No, obviously, you'll be here, we'll celebrate the whole thing. It's like for the British, they're still like, okay, maybe we'll have to see how King Charles, fares. The monarchy has been popular in Britain a lot because of Queen Elizabeth also. She was one of the most popular global leaders that we've seen in the last 60, 70 years.
No doubt.
Now, how King Charles will really resonate with that will have to be seen. But
if I may add though, King Charles has actually been extremely enthusiastic about things which are actually important to Indians. So for example, of Ayurveda, of yoga, and even when he was a prince, right? The man formerly known as Prince. He was extremely enthusiastic about Ayurveda, about traditional medicines, about yoga, about environmentalism, issues that are important to us Indians. And I think that may endear him to many Indians.
There's been some signs also that maybe a little bit more inclusivity, a little more sensitivity. For example, I'm going to be talking to William Dalrymple in a few minutes about the Kohinoor, right? Where's the Kohinoor? Can we please get it back? It won't be a major part of the celebration. Some signs that recognizing that Britain is a more multicultural, multi-ethnic country. Do you think he's going to move in that direction?
I think movements from there are happening already. But look, real change happens over time, right? The earth rotates under your feet. You may not notice it, but actually over time it moves huge distances. Think about it, what's actually happening in the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth began as, when the empire ended. Or rather, actually the Commonwealth began when the empire was still there. And then many other countries got added to it. But for the first time in the history of the Commonwealth, the largest economy in the Commonwealth is not the UK anymore, it's India, right? In another 3-4 years, India's economic size will be twice that of the UK. In another 9-10 years, India's economic size will be bigger than the rest of the Commonwealth combined, right? How will this play out in how relations happen? That's something to be seen.
And that actually brings me to the nub of the history, right? Because what you're describing, it sounds great. India has overtaken Britain and India is going to be larger than the rest of the Commonwealth put together and the rest of it. But let's not forget, Amish, that's the way it used to be till the British came. That's the way it used to be. India had 25%, 30% of world GDP, the richest country in the world, one of the most powerful manufacturing forces in the world at that time. What you're describing is the way it was till the British came. And that's when India became poor.
I know you're right. And at this time, I'll put my diplomatic hat on. The thing
answer
is
that diplomatically, but the essence of what I've said is true, right?
Look, the thing is this: that is there pain in our history? Of course there is, and we must speak honestly of that. And Indians do now, right? But another way of looking at it is, what do we do now? I think one of the things I like about the new India right now is we are pragmatic and we have that approach of charai veti, keep walking, right? Look ahead. What are the opportunities for partnership with the UK? And there are actually opportunities. Like I said earlier, there's no need to pretend that that shared history was positive. It wasn't, obviously, not from our side, right? But we can be pragmatic, look to the future, and there are benefits of the partnership to both countries. We must speak of the past, honestly, no doubt, right? But we don't need to be prisoners of the past. We don't need to carry that hatred into
You've
today.
become a really good diplomat.
Thank you.
You've become a very, very good diplomat. That was so well worded. Very diplomatic. In fact, Humphrey Appleby would have been proud of you.
I don't know if that's a compliment or what.
No, it's a very diplomat. Now, I don't have to be diplomatic. I'm a journalist, right? So at the end of the day, I don't have to be diplomatic about it. So, look, let's face it. I think there's certainly there is a cultural attachment, I think, to Britain now. Cricket, Enid Blyton, many of us have studied out here. I love it here in London. It's beautiful. I feel very much at home. That's the positive part. There is certainly a cultural bond, which I'm sure you're highlighting in your capacity of Minister, Culture and Education. But Shashi, when he was here and he was talking about reparations and saying, can we get an apology at some point? King Charles, one of the first things we should do.
You're trying very hard to get me to say something undiplomatic.
I'm trying. Okay.
You know what I'm going to do? You remember Mohinder Ramanathan? One of the best batsmen. Right?
I told you about culture and
a good thing about when there's a ball on the offside, you just, well left.
Well left. Okay. Let's look at it historically, though. Let's set the diplomacy apart. Looking at it historically, though, fundamentally, what I'm saying is that essentially correct when you think about the monarchy? Picture the time when William Rowe first came to the court of Jahangir, came to the Mughal court, representing, the monarch of Britain. Coming to the court of the Mughals in India wasn't an equal, fair comparison. He came as am I correct in saying there was no match between their respective paths at that time?
Let me, if you read the diaries and the works of Rowe, he wasn't actually too impressed because he thought there was a lot of wealth, but he thought there was a lot of laziness and debauchery. And the way I would look at it is, at the peak of the empire, there were probably around 100 to 150,000 British ruling 350 million Indians, for 200 years.
Yeah.
This is not just conquest, this is humiliation. That is unparalleled, right, in human history. Now, we need to think about why that happened and learn our lessons,
That's
so,
true.
for example, if the elite or the ones running the country are distracted, debauched, decadent, it's not good news for the country, right? There is no doubt that the British managed to rule India because many Indians actually collaborated with the British. That's a sad reality. So that's another thing we Indians have to learn, that whenever we've been disunited, it hasn't worked out well for us. Usually we didn't need enemies to defeat us. We defeated ourselves, right? Because of our lack of unity. So maybe there are some lessons we can draw, right? From what I would try to look at it that way, rather than hating someone today for what their ancestors did 300 years ago. That's not. How does that help me, right? But can we draw lessons which we can implement now?
That's not just diplomatic. That's also very wise, and I completely agree with you. And I think that's right. There's no point in dwelling too much on history.
We should learn from it.
We should remember it.
Yeah.
We should learn from it.
Yeah.
We should say, okay, this is what happened 75 years ago. This is what happened before that. Now we got to move on.
Forgive, but don't forget.
Forgive, but don't forget. That's another really good phrase that I think we should remember. Now, looking ahead, you had Great Britain. There would be people who would argue, correctly in my view, that a lot of the things that made... Look at all of these. Look at that statue, 1769 to 1852. Machine Gun Corps, the people who died in the Machine Gun Corps, Nike behind it. That statue out there of that particular campaign. These are all Indian soldiers. There were Indian soldiers who died. Many of these were Indian soldiers who died here. The money that paid for many of these campaigns was Indian money. So a lot of what made Great Britain great was actually India. India did contribute to that. Now, as you rightly said, India has overtaken again Britain when it comes to economic size. How do you see the relationship proceeding going forward? Because that's cultural ties and that affinity is still
look,
there.
Look, it's like this. I think over the next 5 to 10 years, there will be a recalibration, right? Not just with the UK, with Indian relationships with many countries across the world, right? It is in India's interest to manage this recalibration as smoothly as possible, but there will be a recalibration. And it will be in the interests of many other countries to recalibrate as well, because India will be a profitable relationship for them, right? And one of the things even as an Indian, I'm not a British Indian, I'm Indian, right? But even as an Indian, I had huge respect for Queen Elizabeth. Not because she was the Queen, because of the way she conducted herself, her character, her bearing. That was as Indians would say, very kabile tarif. It was very positive, the way she conducted herself. I think among the things she helped the UK in was actually the end of the empire and a recalibration of UK's relationship with the world. Many empires, when they lose their power, tend to, they don't necessarily adapt to it, they go out swinging.
Yeah.
And like what happened to the German Empire, and then they suffer for it. Whereas Queen Elizabeth kind of helped guide the UK into a new status, right? And relatively smoothly.
Yeah.
And that perhaps is a challenge that King Charles will also have.
He'll have other challenges. I mean, that for example commemorates New Zealand and some of the soldiers, some of the contribution there. In New Zealand and Australia, the debate is also continuing about whether they should be republics. In India, I'm sure the debate will continue about whether we should be part of the Commonwealth. It doesn't hurt, but what does it really do, sort of a thing. Your areas, education and culture, is that where you think one of the major foundations for the relationship with Britain will grow?
Yeah, no doubt. The UK can be our bridgehead into pushing the Indian narrative across the larger world. The Anglophone culture, which is essentially the 5 English-speaking countries, UK, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they still
I
dominate.
can add India to that, I guess.
But we're not Anglophone.
We're not Anglophone.
We are our own. Yeah, we are our own. We may have, but we are our own culture. We're not a part of their culture. But the Anglophone countries still have tremendous cultural power across the world, even now. And there are 5 great cities which actually define what the Anglophone culture is, what they think, what their cultural memes are, which is essentially New York, London, DC, LA, San Francisco. A play in New York will be more influential across the world than a play that can earn far more money in Mumbai, right? Hamilton, for example, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because it's the cultural power of New York. London has that cultural power. And India can actually impact the world's narrative through London. That's the way I see it. So culturally, London can be a wonderful partner. Educationally, you're right, we get 120,000 Indian students coming here every year. That's a lot of money that we are spending out here. And yes, they're getting the benefits of education, but the cost of living crisis out here makes it that much more expensive for Indian students. So the Indian government has opened the space for foreign universities, including British universities, to come to India. We're trying to encourage them on that.
I think that's a theme on which I want to get you. I'm going to cut back to you. And I think it's a story that deserves a program by itself, talking about what India can do in its education front. Amish, such a pleasure. Such a pleasure as always talking to you. Let's enjoy the coronation, celebrate it, and congratulate and wish King Charles all the best. Remember history. Don't forget it.
Yeah.
But you should forgive.
Forgive.
But forgive. Okay. That's really good lessons from us. Thank you so much. Pleasure as always.